Would you turn with me to the book of Amos? The book of Amos, nestled in there between Joel and Obadiah. I'll give you time to find it. We see who the real Bible readers are. If you haven't found it yet, just ask your neighbor for some help. If they haven't found it yet, you know you can always turn to the front, and it tells you what page to turn to. My Bible's 807, but I don't know if you have the same one. The book of Amos, chapter 5, beginning in verse 4. And when you find it, would you say amen, please? That brother's cheating. He got a phone. It's like, I got it. The book of Amos, chapter 5, beginning in verse 4. And it reads, For thus saith the Lord unto the house of Israel, Seek ye me, and ye shall live. But seek not Bethel, nor enter into Gilgal, and pass not to Beersheba. For Gilgal shall surely go into captivity, and Bethel shall come to naught. May the Lord have a blessing to the readers and the hearers, but most importantly, the doers of his word. I like to talk about a nation on death row. A nation on death row. The day is July 21st. The year is 1996. And Damon Thibodeau finds himself in the interrogation room of the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. The constant questioning, badgering, and pressure, and the game of good cop and bad cop have gone on for hours now. And around 4 a.m., Damon has had enough. He's at his wit's end. He can't take it anymore. He's recorded as saying, I did it. I don't remember that I did it, but I did it. He says, I'm guilty, I did it, but I don't have any recollection of doing it. Under the pressure of the constant badgering of the police officers, he has folded under it, and he finds himself admitting to a crime. He says, I did it, but I can't recall doing it. His crime was the murder and rape of his 14-year-old cousin. He admitted that he strangled her with a speaker wire after raping her. He says, I did it, but I don't remember doing it. The police take his admission of guilt and run with it. He's sentenced to death. Damon finds himself on death row. No future to look forward to. No hope for tomorrow. No reason to wake up in the morning because he never knows if his next day will be his last. Damon finds himself deep in a prison cell on death row for a crime he admitted to doing. Damon is on death row. The nation of Israel has chosen to go contrary to the will and to the way of God. They've chosen to do what they want to do, and as a result, Amos has come to say, Israel, your actions have caused you to be sentenced to death. So you see, Amos is not a social reformer, but an exposer of a rebellion against God. He is not a humanitarian, but a herald of God's coming action. He is not announcing new ideas, but rather proclaiming the judgment of God is at hand. He is telling Israel that you have been found guilty, and for your crimes, your punishment is death. America is on death row. See, I've come this morning just as Amos, not as a social reformer, but an exposer against God. America, you are on death row. Yes, the country that was built on the import of African slaves and the export of cotton and sugar. And these slaves have generation after generation found themselves slipping further and further away from God. You are on death row. To Wall Street, who was constantly pulling the money out of people's pockets and cheating them out of what rightfully should be theirs, the hard-earned dollars, you are on death row. To those who are not willing to go against what God has said, who are willing to go against what God has said, and who has said that marriage equality means marriage for all, when God has plainly said, come on now this morning, Mesquite Friendship, I know y'all hear this, when God has plainly said that a marriage constitutes a man and a woman, America, you are on death row. And if you look closely into your life, sometimes the sins that you have committed and the pain that you have brought your family because you wanted to chase after your flesh because of what you have done, if you're not careful, you yourself will be on death row. In the scriptures, we see that God has given a word to his prophet Amos. Amos is a shepherder turned prophet. I think I'll take about 20 seconds right now and let you know that it doesn't matter what you are or what you were, but when God speaks to you, you drop whatever you're doing. It doesn't matter if you're a shepherd out in the field. It doesn't matter if you're crazy, but when God comes to you, it's time to change. You can be a fisherman, you can be a doctor, you can be a Pharisee, you can be a young shepherd with no military experience, or a boy from Guthrie, Oklahoma who lost his father at a young age and his mother was handicapped. But when God comes to speak to you, it doesn't matter what you used to be, but he sees what you're going to be. It doesn't matter if you're the son of a pastor in Mesquite, Texas, and you wanted to do things your own way and said, I'm never going to grow up to preach. When God says, it's time for you to speak for me, it doesn't matter what you want to do. It's time for you to stop whatever you're doing and say, Lord, I surrender all. So if you have me to preach, Lord, give me the word. Amos was a shepherd turned prophet. Amos was used to speaking to the sheep. Now God has given him a word to speak to people. See, it doesn't matter how untalented you might think you are. God can fill you up with the talent. Moses had the audacity to say, Lord, I can't speak, I'm slow of tongue. But when God put the words in Moses' mouth, he was able to say, let my people people might wonder how you got to be what you got to be. They don't understand how you came from where you came from, a broken home, but yet you're still being blessed. They don't understand how you didn't do so well in school, but you got your good job. If God has it for you, it is no secret what God can do. Amos was a shepherder turned prophet. And listen to what he says. He gives them 3 specific places to avoid. The first one is Bethel. If we look at what Bethel means in the original language, we have a Beth El. Beth, house of. El, God. El, as in like when we're talking about El Shaddai, God Almighty, or El Elyon, God Most High, or Emmanuel, God with us. Bethel, house of God. In Genesis 35:1, Bethel is where Jacob was renamed Israel. We have Gilgal in Joshua 4. It records God instructing Joshua to set up a memorial of 12 stones for each of the 12 tribes at Gilgal, and after crossing the Jordan prior to them conquering Jericho. We have Beersheba, which is where in the book of Genesis, Abraham makes a covenant with Abimelech. See, God has told Amos to tell the people to stay away from these 3 places. See, as I studied, I couldn't help but wonder why God would tell his people through Amos, his messenger, to not visit these prominent places of note. God had done such amazing things in the lives of the children of Israel's forefathers. So why tell Amos to tell the people don't seek out Bethel or enter into Gilgal or pass over into Beersheba? And what I had discovered was that the people began to take what had once solely been used for the worship of God and turn it into a cultic place. And they took what was meant for God and began to bring other gods into there. And they took what God had established specifically for his people and turned it around into a house of worshiping other deities. See, let me tell you something. When the church is no longer a place that God intended for it to be, you can find that church itself on death row. See, they were going to these places and they were playing church. They were going to these places and they were doing it just so they could say, look at me. I'm here. I traveled to Gilgal. I went over to Beersheba. I spent a little bit of time in Bethel. And they were doing it for all the wrong reasons. And God said, since you want to do it for that reason and not to worship me, you just don't even need to go there. And sometimes God has to keep us from going places that we want to go, that we think we should go to, that we think we should find ourselves in because we're going there for all the wrong reasons. See, what I discovered was that the death was not a physical death, but a spiritual death. The death wasn't through hanging or through in front of a firing squad or by drowning. It wasn't a physical death, but it was a spiritual death. God was going to cut himself off from them because they were taking what was intended to worship him, what was intended to be for him, and doing what they wanted to do with it. Let me tell you something this morning, my brothers and sisters. You ought to be careful with what God has given you to use for his glory. Mama used to say that if we began to use our musical talents outside of the church, she prayed that God would take them away from us because he had blessed us with an ability to play instruments. And because the blessing came from God, if we weren't going to use the blessing for God, then she said, Lord, just take it away from them. And sometimes God has to take away what he gave to you so you can realize that you didn't get it on your own. You didn't get that job because you were so smart. You didn't get that house because you look so good. You're not driving that car because of anything you've done on your own, but it was God who gave it to you. It was God who put money in Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. So you better give him back what is rightfully his. And if you find yourself not giving unto God what is his, you'll have money in the bank, but you don't know where it is. You'll have money in the bank, but your car keeps on breaking down. You have money in the bank, but somehow your house is in foreclosure. You have money in the bank, but no food in the pantry. You ought to give God what is rightfully his. Their sin was not against their fellow man. Their sin was against God himself. Their sin was against the God who had brought them out of Egypt, who rained manna down from heaven, who allowed them to conquer Jericho without having to lift a single sword. Their sin was against the God who had brought them so far. And sometimes if we're not careful, we will find ourselves sinning against a God who has done so much for us. If we allow ourselves to do so, we will find ourselves in a place where God has cut himself off from us because of the decisions that we make in our lives. God himself said, do not go to these places Because when you go there, you're going there for all the wrong reasons. But the God who is ever loving and faithful always gives a way out. God said, seek me and live. God says, seek me and live. Yeah, God is saying you might be on spiritual death row, but if you seek me, you're going to live. See, here, seek means to worship. Seek means to go after with a fervent reason. Seek means to actively pursue God, to pursue him, and when you get there, worship him. Seek means to go after him with all that you have inside of you. God says, seek me and live. Worship me and live. Jesus told that woman at the well that the day is coming that they who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. That means it's going to be a time where you can't fake it anymore. It's going to be a time where you can't play games anymore. Where it's going to be a time that if you're going to be down for God, you got to be all the way down for God. That you might be able to trick us here at Mesquite Friendship right off of 80, but when you go home, how are you living? That's the question. When you're at your job, do they know that you attend Mesquite Friendship? And if you're not acting right, don't act a fool and then tell them that you go here, because that ain't the kind of publicity we want. But we want some people who are going to give God their all, who are going to say, for God I live and for God I'll die. So we're going to worship God with everything that we have in us. Seek me. Seek me. See, your problem is you're seeking everything else. You wonder why you keep on getting your heart broken, because you still seeking that dirty dog man. But he pays my bills. Give it to the Lord and say, Lord, I'm done messing around with this. I'm going to seek you. See, we're seeking for convenience. We're seeking because it feels good. We're seeking because our flesh says seek after that. But God is saying, if you want to live right, if you want to be removed from your spiritual death row, what you ought to do is seek me. And then what I'll supply you with will be everything that you need. You'll get your life back. You'll get your house back. You'll get your car back. You'll get your peace of mind back. I'm not preaching health, wealth, and prosperity, but what I'm trying to let you know is that when God has you in your hands, he's more for you than all. Not some, not just a few things, but he's more for you than all the world against you. Seek me and live. A few hours after Damon Thibodeau told the police that he was guilty, they let him go to bed. They let him get some food. And when he awoke, he realized the mistake that he made. You see, my brothers and sisters, he admitted to a crime that he didn't do. Because of the pressures of the interrogating officers, because of his sleep deprivation, he said, I did it, but I don't remember doing it. After 15 years in jail, somebody heard about his story. The Innocence Project is a nonprofit organization that looks into the cases of those who have been wrongfully convicted. And once the Innocence Project heard about Damon Thibodeau's case, they took him under their wing. They took all the evidence that the police had used against him and brought it before the same judge that convicted him. As soon as the judge looked at the evidence from the light of those involved in the Innocence Project, he immediately declared that Damon Thibodeau was not guilty. And after 15 years and 23 days in jail, Damon Thibodeau walked out an exonerated and free man. Oh, but when I think about my life and how guilty I am of so many egregious crimes towards God and my fellow man, how I deserve nothing short of death, I can't help but to think about my own Innocence Project. Do you mind if I tell you about it? God said, Caleb, don't seek this. Caleb, don't enter into there. Caleb, don't pass over into there. But I lived my life how I wanted to live my life. I did what I wanted to do. I sinned against God and my fellow man. I deserved to be sleeping in my grave. But God saw me where I was. Are there any witnesses in the house this morning that can look in the rearview mirror of their life and see all the mistakes that they made and see all the sin that they did and see all the crimes that they made against God and their fellow man? Is there anybody here who can say that I messed up, that I got myself in some mess? But God, who is rich in grace and mercy, saw me where I was, and it came down and took my case and presented it before the judge. But the difference between myself and Damon Thibodeau is that I was guilty. I was guilty, but it didn't matter, because when Jesus took hold of my file, when Jesus took hold of my case, when Jesus got my sinful documents into his hand, and he went before God the Father, the judge, he said, Lord, I know he messed up. I know he's guilty, and I know he deserves death. But God, let me die. Let me die in his place. Let me take his place because I love him so much. I know he messed up. I know he fell. But Lord, just give him another chance. But when I messed that one up, guess what they gave me? Another chance. And when I messed up that one, guess what they gave me? Another chance. And when I messed that one up, guess what they gave me? Another chance. Is there anybody here who's tried everything else? You sought after all the wrong stuff. You sought after everything but God. But when Jesus found out that you were willing and ready and able to turn your life over, he took your case. He took your mistakes. He took your hang-ups, hookups, and mistakes. And he turned it around and said, now go forth and sin no more. Do you love him this morning? Has it brought you out of a... He saw where I was. He said, Father, let me step into flesh and go down 42 generations and walk the face of the earth so I can see what sin looks like. And they're going to talk about me. They're going to spit on me. They're going to beat me. But don't you know that they're going to kill me as well? But it's not because they had it, but I lay my life down freely. God is speaking to someone this morning. God is speaking to someone this morning. You seeked everything else, You've gone after everything else, and you find yourself on spiritual death row. But Jesus came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. God is saying, seek me and live. God bless you.